Chill is very excited about the camera. He just discovered that he can start and stop it from a different area and not have to fuss with the screen. But hello, adventurers, and welcome back to the Dragon's Lair. Today we'll be discussing one of the unsung heroes from the Harry Potter series, Neville Longbottom. So let's jump right into it, shall we? Starting off with his strength, I'm gonna go ahead and cover my bases and say spoiler alert: 3, 2, 1. We should be good. There's not a whole lot to him, especially not in the beginning, right? He's kind of one of those characters that's very, very minor, almost comic relief until the end. Then all of a sudden, he gains the physical strength to pull an all-nighter while trying to destroy a bridge, and more importantly, obliterate a snake with a sword. I said spoiler alert, so my bases were covered. We're good. But yeah, more on the destroying the snake with a sword. This kid, who's a wizard, I want to point that out. Wizarding world of Harry Potter all of a sudden knows how to use a sword in such a way that he can just destroy a snake. And I'm not talking like a little garden snake. I'm talking like probably bigger than you or me. Like, when all is said and done when it comes to sheer size. Like, this snake is huge. It's definitely bigger than he is. That's for sure. So, you know, he learned how to use a sword real fast. I'm just saying. But I'm gonna give it to him. That's really all we have for the strength towards Neville. I can't really think of anything else. Can you, Joe?
No.
No? Yeah. So with that, I'm going to say his strength is rather low in the beginning, or like average in the beginning, given that he is like a 10-year-old boy. 10 to 11 when he got his Hogwarts letter and joined the school. So, relatively low in the beginning, and there at the end, I would venture to say got to middling high. So, I'm going to say probably 8 to 10 for the beginning score, and then towards the end, probably 14 to 16, just with his really just destructive sword usage at the end. I don't know what else to say about it. He's kind of laughing silently off camera, but I don't know what else to say. It's like it went 0 to 100 real quick.
Mm-hmm.
So, moving into Dexterity, this is probably a score that's not great, right? Not terrible, I'd have to say, but not like super out there as the statistic of Neville Longbottom, right? So, spoiler alert, 3, 2, 1, we should be good. He goes to the Yule Ball with Ginny Weasley. And this is more of an assumption on my part, but given that there wasn't an explicitly, like, bad time for Neville that I can recall, that must mean things went well for him. So I'm gonna give him that. We also get to see him a little bit in the Harry Potter Teaches Wisdom to the World movie, where he's, doing alright, dodging, weaving in and out of strikes, and avoiding spells, I should say, not strikes. But just avoiding, in general, getting hit, and doing a relatively good job of just taking hits without them being too effective towards him. So, with that, I'm also going to assume, towards the beginning of the movie series, that he probably wasn't that good at dancing, given how much we have to see him practice for the Yule Ball. So he probably wasn't that good, and then from a fighting standpoint, you're going to get better as time moves on, so in the beginning you have to assume that he probably wasn't that good at dodging and avoiding spells in the beginning. So his score could go somewhere, really anywhere between 8 to, I would say 16, given his dexterity and, or not dexterity, but his dancing ability and his dodging strikes. We never really get to see a whole lot of his stealth, but I would assume that would have a little bit to do with it as well. I think there's a time or two where he's relatively stealthy. I can't recall off the top of my head. Can you?
No idea.
I for some reason I think there was a time he had the cloak, but I also could just be making that up. I'll leave that down in the description below if I can find out if Neville did in fact have the cloak of invisibility, or if he was just sneaking around. Because he had to sneak around at one point to get to the room of requirement. Mm-hmm. People were hot on his tails, or hot on his tail, and he wasn't seen. So that was kind of that.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I don't remember if he explicitly had the cloak of invisibility. That's something I could see him under it, but at the same point in time, 90% of that movie was dark, and you couldn't really make out the features of the people under the cloak. So I'll look that up and see. But yeah, as I said, it'll be in the description. Don't take my word that he did have the cloak, because he might not have. Did I give a score? Not yet.
Yes.
Yeah, 8 to 16, and then I started talking about it. Okay, so just to reiterate, I would say probably closer to 8 to 14, with 16 being feasible but not probable. Moving into Constitution. I feel like, spoiler alert, 3, 2, 1, we should be good. I feel like just being a Longbottom should qualify him for having a high Constitution. I don't know. There's just something about his experience at Hogwarts and the name he gives Longbottom that seems like a high Constitution is required. That's just my opinion, though. So, for instance, I said spoiler alert. We're gonna go. He was at one point lifted by his ears to the top of a room and then hung by his cloak, just left there for however long. So it is worth noting that his ears didn't fall off or rip, which is really impressive, actually. I would imagine they're not good points to hold someone by.
No. That's why old ladies always go for them.
I guess. I mean, they hurt.
It hurts.
But I don't I would imagine if you were if someone was hanging off a cliff and you were holding them by their ear, probably wouldn't be the best point of contact. I don't know, I would just imagine the hand would probably be better, more useful, something like that. But, that's just me. It is also worth noting that he was the first to face his spear in the Defense Against the Dark Arts class. So there is that as well. I mean, aside from that, there's not a whole lot that I can bring up off the top of my head, but he seemed to have a lot of bad luck in the movie, most of which was usually physically detrimental to him, at least a little bit. For instance, the mandrakes, the shrieking. He dealt with that. He was fine in the long run, but, he did have to deal with that. And I feel like overall that kind of made him stronger because of how much physical abuse he went through. Even if minor mostly, he went through a lot of it. And that kind of makes him a little bit stronger than the rest of the cast. I don't know. That could just be me. So yeah, I'm gonna go with somewhere around 10 to 14, just kind of depending on if you think, oh well, he goes through a lot, but he goes through a lot and it's not really ever in his favor, then okay, you might go 10 or a little lower, maybe 8. But if you're kind of more with me, you might say, all right, it's probably more 14 because he manages to take all of it and always comes back for more. He's always there. He doesn't give up or quit or anything like that. So it's just kind of like I'm gonna be with him on that one. I'm gonna say 12 to 14 for his score. Moving into before I do that, I'm just gonna reiterate 8 to 10 if you think he's on the lower side, 12 to 14 if you kind of more agree with me. Now moving into intelligence. There's not a whole lot here that we can pull from. Neville isn't really a huge main character, and as such, he never really has any of these big, bright ideas. Save for, spoiler alert, 3, 2, 1, we should be good. With the exception of 2 things I can pull off the top of my head. First off, he had the idea of Harry eating the gillyweed, or consuming, I should say, the gillyweed, before going down underwater so he would have water breathing and better movement under the water. Now, I said spoiler alert, right?
Perhaps.
Well, I've said it now, and this pause should be sufficient for people to click off. Yes. That being said, one of the professors at Hogwarts, who was not the real professor at Hogwarts, it's a long story that you're going to have to watch yourself, did try to claim the idea for Harry to eat gillyweed for himself, that he gave it to Neville specifically. So there is that. That being said, there is one instance that was purely Neville's idea. The destruction of the back bridge into Hogwarts. At the Siege of Hogwarts, everyone was trying to swarm around and essentially attack Hogwarts from the evil side, and the good guys were in Hogwarts defending it. Neville was defending Hogwarts, and he had the idea of destroying the back entrance, which would then only leave one entrance into Hogwarts that was very well defended. So that was Neville's idea. He came up with the idea, and with the help of Seamus, they kind of put together a very fast plan and destroyed the bridge. While people were on it, which gave it even more destructive capacity, because they didn't just destroy an inanimate object, they stopped people that would have otherwise been able to walk back and come around front. So it's actually kind of valuable, too. Mm-hmm. But those are both Neville's ideas. So, aside from that, we don't really get to see a whole lot of him, and he is kind of a minor character. So I can see how you might think his intelligence either isn't important or is lower. For my score, though, I'm going to go, because these two ideas really just kind of stick out to me, I'm going to say somewhere closer to 16 to 18 for his intelligence score. That's just kind of the vibe I'm getting. Then we move into wisdom. There's not a whole lot I can go off of for wisdom. You know? He's kind of a minor character, and we don't really get to see a lot of him. The only thing I have is, spoiler alert, 3, 2, 1, we should be good, is when he was in the Harry Teaches Wisdom to the World class, where Harry just kind of taught him how to use what he knows in the real world. And I think that has to count for something. That being said, we don't really get to see a whole lot of it, unfortunately. So, I'm going to say for his wisdom, it's going to be more middling. I'm saying 10 to 12, maybe 8 to 12 if you kind of lean more in that direction. I'm going to say that's really your call, up in the air. I would probably go 10 to 12. Moving into charisma. Now, most people would assume this stat is going to be pretty bad. Spoiler alert, 3, 2, 1. We should be good. He's not uncharismatic. He's unlucky, yes. And that might detriment the way people view him to an extent. But he's not uncharismatic, right? I mean, for instance, he manages to go with Ginny Weasley to the dance, Yule Ball. In the end, he also manages to get Luna Lovegood to like him. Now, she's not the epitome of extreme charisma as well. But it is worth noting that someone who is very uncharismatic would probably have a hard time landing even Luna Lovegood, the oddball character. That is worth kind of making note of. Pair that with the fact that he does seem to have a lot of friends. That there are at least people that are around him and like him enough. He might not be the most popular kid in school, but he's not expressly unpopular. He's not the kid that nobody wants to be around ever. He's just a little unlucky and almost clumsy at times. So that being said, I'm going to go with his score probably more towards 14-ish, give or take. Maybe a little lower, 12. Maybe a little higher if you think just kind of his general friendliness is more applicable to his score. It's going to be your decision, but I would go with right around 14. That brings us to racing class. Straightforward. Correct? I didn't miss anything, Chill? He's shaking his head no. Okay. Racing class. Straightforward. Well, he's obviously a human. I think we can see that for ourselves. He's also going to be a wizard. I would go with a War Magic's wizard? Explicitly because, spoiler alert, 3, 2, 1. We should be good. He was a part of Dumbledore's army. And that would essentially be, for those who aren't familiar with that term, that would essentially be the people that Harry taught the wisdom of the world to. I think they say that at one point, but I'm not sure at this point in time.
Maybe.
I think that's where they get it from. Is they mentioned it like once or twice in that movie, and then left it alone.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's what that refers to. You'll hear me say that a couple times. You probably have already heard me say that a few times. But Dumbledore's army is the group of students Harry taught in the Room of Requirement about how to use what they know in the real world. But yeah, so War Magics makes sense with that because it's about kind of defending and attacking, balancing those two. You could also go with something like Evocation if you just wanted the straight attacking benefits. That works too. You know, it's really kind of your call. As for the conceptual build, this is going to sound a little jarring, but I went with Firbolg. They're kind of usually viewed upon as bigger and kind of almost clumsy at times. Not like explicitly like just bad luck and clumsy all the time, but they kind of give off that vibe, at least when I think about the Firbolg. Pair that with the fact that I said spoiler alert in this section, so we're good. Pair that with their nature-based kind of abilities, like being able to limitedly convey thoughts to plants and beasts, and it kind of works with Neville, explicitly because of what he does after he graduates from Hogwarts. After a little while, he eventually goes back to Hogwarts as a professor of herbology, which is why for the class, I'm going with Druid instead of Wizard. I'm switching things up just a little bit for Neville, just because it kind of makes sense. So yeah, I would go with Druid for him. I don't know exactly what, like, kind of Druid, because he was a professor of herbology, which seems to me like generic druidic magic. That being said, I would probably go with something like Circle of the Forest, just because Hogwarts seems to have a lot of forests, like the what is it, the Dark Forest or Forbidden Forest, Forbidden Forest that they're always in, like every single time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Why would you call it the Forbidden Forest if that's the number one place people go? I don't understand. But so something like that. Or you could go Wizard with an emphasis on nature-based spells. So, like Hallucinatory Terrain, that would probably be, if that's the type of spell you're going to go with, that would probably be more Illusion, and then you have things like Poison Spray and that sort of thing, that would probably be more Evocation. Your call, all in all, depending on what kind of spells you want and need for your campaign. But yes, that would be how I would build him, if that makes sense. As for backstory, Neville is an only child of, I believe the mother's name was Alice. What was the father's name? Do you have that in front of you?
Frank?
Frank, and it was Alice, correct?
Yes.
Frank and Alice Longbottom. Things go bad, and they are essentially tortured to insanity by Bellatrix Lestrange, which is very unfortunate. He's then raised by his grandmother. He is then raised by his grandmother. I don't know if I said that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay. I know I said that, but then I heard myself and it sounded like I said something completely different. But, yes, he's raised by his grandmother until it's time for him to go to Hogwarts, and he joins the school the same year as Harry and the crew, actually being placed into the same, house, not class, house, as them as well. That is where his story begins. Now, unfortunately, that is all I have for you today, Fine Adventures. So, feel free to go check out past videos. Also, feel free to leave a comment, as long as you keep it respectful. Be on the lookout for my next video, which will be on Draco Malfoy, starting some of the bad guys next week. Assumably next week, assuming nothing goes wrong. Also, feel free to come join my Discord or come hang out on Twitch. Other than that, I will catch you all later.